What's the worst coworker you've ever worked with? My coworker likes to initiate conversations, then does long pauses, where you go to say something back, then he cuts you off and keeps talking. He has entire conversations almost entirely by himself. He also likes to make changes to my paperwork before it's turned in, ends up riddled with spelling mistakes, while he tries to make the content look smarter. Fortunately it's all electronically stamped with who made revisions. Worked with a girl who would sometimes just lay on the floor and play on her phone. She would routinely flip out about something her boyfriend did and just start screaming curse words, sometimes in front of customers. She was eventually fired for smoking weed while on the clock. I had a manager once who dumped trash on my desk my third day there. She said it was to remind me that taking out the trash was part of my job description. It wasn't. I was a research assistant at a mortgage firm. Fast food. Third shift. The only other employee stayed in the bathroom doing blow. Context: I work in a hospital as a nurse's aide and my department focuses on transporting patients around the facility for tests and room changes. I work night shift and this person started their shift at 6 AM. There was this lady I worked with that just had the nastiest attitude. Normally I can get along with most folks, but this person just brought the whole room down with negative vibes. Nothing was ever good, and she always had bad shifts. One thing she did that upset a lot of people was take patients down for rays and leave them down there to return to our office. The big thing to remember here is that even the lengthiest rays take maybe 10 minutes at the very most, 2 to 5 minutes on average for the scans. Every morning we got rays to do, and I had to send her back down to return patients to their rooms after the ray technicians called right as she got back to our office. The instances of leaving patients were common, so I informed my boss several times in person and email. Apparently she had an attitude with every other department we worked with and never informed nurses that we were moving their patients. Big no when meds and vital signs need to be done. One day she had abandoned a patient in the waiting room when they were waiting for a ride home and told no one. So security had found a patient just sitting alone for 15 to 30 minutes without supervision. It took this and a year of recorded evidence for this person to finally get fired. When that happened it's like a dark cloud lifted and a lot of people were relieved. Oh, and she tried to get various employees around the facility to sign a form to argue against her case. One person signed. Not necessarily a coworker, but my old supervisor literally told me not to think, even if it's wrong, that I do things her way and not to ask questions because I should already know what to do. I had just gotten the position. I have several bad ones, but the one that drives me the most crazy is a lady who creates problems just so she can solve them. She takes a simple job, finds the one tiny issue, blows that up, and freaks everyone out, and then solves it so she can be the hero. Just take the 1 minute to fix the issue in the first place. It would save the literal hours she spends working everyone up so she can be their savior. When I was an intern, there was this old shrew who would call people into her office. My cube shared a thin wall, gossip, then call those people in to tell them what was said, etc. She would try to frame people for shit she did wrong. She was so arrogant, and she refused to adapt to workforce modernization. Example, she refused to learn how to hyperlink in emails, documents, etc. A real ray of sunshine she was. My worst coworker was one I worked with when I was a cashier at Walmart. She approached me and asked me to cash out her paycheck. I was still new at the job and never got training on how to do that function. She was sympathetic, so she walked me through how to do it. Transaction over and done. I go on about my day. I get called back a couple of days later by my managers and they circled me in an office and accused me of stealing. After tears, videotapes, and telling them what happened, they told me that apparently this coworker of mine had stolen not only from me, but several other people that day as well. They just wanted to confirm I wasn't in on the deal. Fuck Walmart, and fuck that bitch for almost getting me arrested. Hired a cook on a good recommendation. He was just fine the first 2 weeks. Then I noticed food going missing. Then supplies started going missing. Then a customer told me that he had been adding auto 30% tips as food purchases. When I looked at the books, I saw that he had been adding 30% tips to all the credit card sales. And the cash rings were off from what should have been sold. I fired him that day. The next day he came in and apologized. Said he was on drugs and was going to rehab. I wished him well. Then next day he tried to break in after close and was caught. Idiot. I worked in childcare and they had hired a new assistant/trainee teacher for my room. Each room has 2 teachers. She just constantly argued about the dumbest shit and always tried to argue with me about both company and state childcare policies because that's dumb. Also was late every day her first week there. It all just started adding up until I was changing diapers and she was holding a 2-year-old child on her lap. I see a child biting another child and say you need to go help them as I have a child in the middle of a very explosive poopy diaper change up on the changing table and can't leave him there obviously. She doesn't get up. I repeat it and she says well I have this kid on my lap. So I say take him off your lap. She responds he's strong like this grown ass adult is unable to move a 2-year-old off her lap because of some weird super strength. Then the child bites the other child again, and at that point I'm mad and tell her to get up and help them now. She then proceeds to say so what? I have to watch these 4 kids while you just have one up on the table, like I'm somehow supposed to have multiple children on the table at once. To make her job of sitting on the floor making sure kids don't get bit twice in a row easier, and our ratios were 4:1 anyways. I finished my diaper change, stuck my head out the door to my supervisor, and told her get this lady out of my room and they did after, and wrote her up. After reviewing the footage of the incident, she was fired for no call no showing the next week. I've worked with a lot of idiots in childcare, but she was so shitty in such a short amount of time. The hour manager at my last job had 0 training, education or experience in hours. She was argumentative, passive-aggressive and incompetent. Toward the end she asked me why are you being resistant and you're not being a team player when I was advocating for client safety. I was the second person in less than a year to leave and hire an attorney. I've worked a lot of factories, but one I worked at was mainly for felons. The pay you complete shit and work you so hard it tears you body and mind up. I just graduated high school and it was my second factory, so I didn't know any better. One guy I work with, we nicknamed Big Matt since we already had another Matt. Well, Big Matt was a big fan of crystal and steroids, so the dude was absolutely jacked, but this 35-year-old lived with his mom. He said it had to do with him being a kid and walking and her being raped, and ever since then he never wanted to leave her alone. At the time I thought wow, that would explain the substance abuse. He just wants to be strong to protect her. Well, I was a fucking idiot. 2 months later, Big Matt and 2 coworkers didn't show up, so I asked the supervisor what happened, but he didn't know either. Next day one of the coworkers came in and told us that all 3 had been arrested because after buying an O of weed, Big Matt's mom called the cops on them. So before the cops showed up, Big Matt, a 6'some-odd-inch buff meth head, beat his mother within an inch of life for calling the cops on him. Next day I looked him up, and sure enough he was booked in a local prison. Suppose that has to be the worst coworker out of all the ones I faced. This is about 15 years ago, but the office I worked in instituted a scent-free policy. One woman, who was already insufferable, was so offended by it that she snuck in her perfume collection. She'd walk down the halls and spray perfume into empty offices or cubicles when no one was looking, or before everyone arrived in the morning. This went on for well over a month or 2, and we had no idea who was responsible. My coworkers and I started referring to this mysterious person as the Channel Bandit. She was finally caught on camera in the act. She'd left for 3 weeks vacation and was unaware that we had installed cameras after a break-in. Some of us already suspected her, as the Channel Bandit mysteriously stopped spraying while she was away. She quit right after she was caught. None of us were sad to see that cedar-scented psycho leave. I have a coworker who's very old-fashioned and strongly believes that males and females cannot be friends. Well, it just so happens that my manager and I, a male and a female, happen to get along quite well because of our similar ages and interests. She reported me to the other managers for it and accused me of sleeping with him. This guy named Daniel I used to work with at McDonald's in high school. He let everyone know he worked out and enjoyed being on the football team. He had this thing about taking 5 shits a day. He would walk by on his way back from the toilet, chest out, shoulders back and triumphantly announce that's shit number 3, fucking Daniel. He would walk in every day, like it was his first day with no memory of anything we showed him the previous day. He was only focused for the first 30 minutes, then the rest of the time would be on his phone and try to work with one hand, which is bad because I work in a restaurant. Can't cook with one hand, but that didn't stop him from trying. Then one day he just stopped showing up for like a week, then was confused when he came back and was fired. Edit. I'm not sure if he had memory issues or anything like that. At least he didn't tell us or the owner. He did however like to talk about how easy our job was because he'd had 4 other restaurant jobs before this one. He was only 19, but we didn't make him do anything complicated. But he would forget easy things like where we kept burger buns or where buttons were on the register. Also, he always left trash laying around. After he was done with a job, it would be me and my other coworkers who cleaned up after him, and his excuse was always that he didn't think it mattered because it was gonna get cleaned up eventually. He still comes in every once in a while to watch our TV, sometimes with friends and sometimes by himself. He never buys anything, but he just does it quietly so no one bothers him.